Have you ever noticed that when you genuinely begin to evolve, those around you grow uneasy? They won't say it directly, naturally. They'll mask it with humor, with guidance disguised as worry, or with that tense quietness when you mention something profound. But underneath, what's truly occurring is straightforward. Your intellectual growth challenges their safe space, and nobody enjoys being compelled to face their own stagnation. Perhaps you're experiencing precisely this at this moment. You began thinking in new ways, behaving in new ways, perhaps even challenging beliefs you once embraced without hesitation. And abruptly, you felt isolated, misinterpreted, criticized. What nobody revealed to you, and what Nietzsche grasped better than most, is that this is the toll of forging a formidable consciousness. Not ordinary fortitude, but a force so profound, so authentic, that it unsettles others. It alarms them. It reveals, without uttering a syllable, the fragility of those still existing on automatic. But what causes this phenomenon? Because a genuinely commanding intellect poses a danger to widespread ordinariness. And Nietzsche was explicit about this. When you choose to reason independently, establish your own principles and reject the soothing fantasy of prefabricated answers, you become threatening to established order, threatening to those around you, and critically threatening to your previous identity. This video is an invitation, a provocation. It's not designed for the comfortable, nor for those seeking simple solutions. It's designed for you who are exhausted from being imprisoned by your own doubts, who senses the edge of an internal fracture, and who stands ready to construct something unbreakable, a consciousness that resists manipulation, a consciousness that intimidates because it refuses to yield. So if you sense you're prepared for this journey, a solitary, demanding, yet utterly revolutionary journey, remain here, because what Nietzsche offers will challenge you, but it can also liberate you, and afterward, your perspective will be permanently altered. Part 1. The Crucible of Suffering. Nietzsche wasn't merely a thinker. He was an architect of human consciousness, someone who possessed the bravery to stare into existence's void, and not merely observe it, but plunge into its depths. And it's exactly within that void, within that internal turbulence that most avoid, that he discovered the wellspring of genuine power. Because for Nietzsche, transformation doesn't emerge from tranquility, predictability, or structure. It emerges from anguish. It emerges from collapse. It emerges from disorder. He declared, "You must harbor chaos within yourself to give birth to a dancing star." This isn't romantic imagery. This is psychological truth. It signifies that if you desire to forge an impenetrable mind, you must release the naive notion that it manifests through ease, superficial encouragement, or optimistic declarations. No, authentic strength materializes when you confront adversity without escape, when you cease demanding existence to be gentler and begin demanding yourself to be more resilient. Consider the moments of your greatest development. Did they occur when everything flowed smoothly? Or when you were devastated, directionless, forced to reconstruct yourself entirely? Nietzsche perceived suffering not as existence's error, but as its primary catalyst. He didn't glamorize agony. He wielded it as an instrument. And when you transform your relationship with hardship, with defeat, with isolation, you begin cultivating something exceptional, an unconquerable spirit. And precisely there, the world grows disturbed by your presence. Because while most flee from chaos, you master navigating within it. While others plead for normalcy, you forge excellence. But this metamorphosis demands a violent rupture with everything you've absorbed about strength. Being powerful isn't maintaining constant cheerfulness. It isn't projecting false emotional mastery. Being powerful means enduring the insufferable and emerging more formidable. Yet Nietzsche recognized that chaos alone proves insufficient. It can annihilate you without an inner foundation, an anchor. That's why we must now address the most critical moment in Nietzschean philosophy, when he eliminates God and positions upon you the complete burden of existential accountability. Because when there's no longer heaven to gaze toward, the universe must be born within you. If this resonates with you, press the subscribe button. Thank you for your engagement. Part 2. The death of God and radical freedom. When Nietzsche proclaimed God is dead, he wasn't rejoicing. He was delivering a warning many still misunderstand today. What he destroyed wasn't divinity itself. He destroyed the comfortable lie. The lie that some superior force manages everything. The lie that a predetermined design exists, a ready-made purpose, a meaning granted externally. God's death represents the termination of all justifications. And that terrifies people, because until then, outsourcing life's responsibility was simple. Believing everything possesses reason was comforting, that suffering belongs to divine intention, that greater purpose ultimately justifies everything. Nietzsche violently strips away this veil. He confronts you directly and declares, "You stand alone. No prefabricated meaning exists. Now you are the architect." And here begins the authentic construction of commanding consciousness. Because most individuals crumble upon realizing they face chaos alone, without instructions, without assurances, with nobody to accuse. But those possessing courage to face this without disintegrating, they begin forging unshakable awareness. With God's death, Nietzsche propels you into radical freedom's abyss. You shouldn't follow commandments. You must generate values. You shouldn't obey. You must transcend yourself. It's the emergence of brutal independence, and accompanying it arrives the burden. Everything now rests upon you. No more absolution exists. No more salvation exists. Either you construct yourself, or you collapse. But here's the revelation. This freedom that frightens you also represents the greatest power source available. When you comprehend that nobody arrives to rescue you, something within awakens. A fire compelling you to rise even while wounded. That forces independent thought, independent feeling, independent action. Not because someone proclaimed it correct, but because you determined it so. Within this rupture from existential crutches, Nietzsche prepares ground for something even more magnificent. The emergence of a revolutionary existence. A human type who doesn't live by herd regulations, who doesn't require validation or authorization. A being who creates personal morality, who surpasses personal limitations and lives as creator. A being that terrifies the weak because it compels them to see themselves authentically. This being possesses a name. Nietzsche called it the Ubermensch, the overman. And that's our next exploration. Because if you want to build a mind so strong that nothing shatters it, you need to understand how to become this figure who exists above conventions, guided solely by their own will to power. Part 3. The Übermensch, Beyond Human Limitations. Nietzsche didn't believe in humanity's gradual, passive evolution. He believed in rupture, in radical transformation, in creative destruction. That's why he conceived the Ubermensch, the overman. This isn't about superheroes. This isn't someone with supernatural abilities. The Ubermensch is a being who has transcended everything binding ordinary humans. Guilt, obedience, herd morality, the craving for acceptance. The Ubermensch doesn't seek acceptance, doesn't request permission to exist, creates personal internal laws and lives by them, even if that positions him against the entire world. And that's precisely why his mind becomes indestructible, because it's not constructed on others' expectations. It doesn't require external validation for self-worth. It's self-sustaining. It feeds on its own will to power, the profound impulse to shape reality in its own image. This is the central point. The Ubermensch doesn't adapt to the world. He imposes meaning upon the world. He doesn't seek comfort. He seeks greatness. He doesn't ask, "Is this permitted?" He asks, "Is this worthy of me?" And this perspective shift changes everything. Because when you begin viewing yourself as creator rather than servant, your thinking, acting, and feeling transform completely. But here's the challenge. Becoming this being requires sacrifice. You'll have to eliminate parts of yourself still begging for approval. You'll have to face the pain of not belonging. You'll have to bear the weight of constructing your identity from nothing, without guarantees, without encouragement, without audience applause. And most people cannot handle it. They surrender before beginning. They retreat to the safety of ready-made beliefs. dogmas and rules someone else wrote for them. The path to the Ubermensch is lonely, and Nietzsche knew this. He himself lived marginalized, misunderstood, called insane, isolated from the world he attempted liberating. But within that isolation he discovered his freedom. And this is what you must understand. The stronger your mind becomes, the further you drift from the masses. The higher you rise, the more you disturb. The Übermensch's construction is the most brutal and transformative process anyone can face, because it demands you destroy everything that isn't yours. Everything imposed by sick culture, by society rewarding obedience and punishing authenticity, and only after destroying do you begin building. But this construction doesn't occur among crowds. It occurs in silence, in withdrawal, in the profound solitude separating the strong from the weak. And that's exactly why we must now explore the most neglected yet most powerful aspect of this journey, the solitude of the strong. Because the truth is, to become unshakable, you must learn walking alone. And few are prepared for that. Are you? If what you're hearing resonates deeply, you'll discover genuine value exploring Nietzsche's work more thoroughly. The path to the Ubermensch is demanding, but it's the only path to authentic freedom. Part 4. The Solitude of the Strong. If there's something nobody tells you about the path of mental strength, it's this. The stronger you become, the more isolated you feel. And it's not because you choose isolation. It's because the world stops knowing what to do with you. Nietzsche spoke clearly about this. The free spirit, the one who breaks from common morality, who rejects easy truths, who thinks independently, inevitably distances from the herd. And that distancing hurts. But that pain is necessary because genuine growth requires space, and you cannot grow while bound to others' expectations. Most people exist within an invisible herd where every thought is monitored, every action measured by others' reactions. You've grown accustomed to moving in groups, thinking like groups, feeling secure because people surround you. But what Nietzsche proposes is opposite. He tears you from that comfort and throws you into the desert. In that desert, no applause exists, no praise, no guide. Only you exist. Your doubts, your traumas, your fears, your temptation to surrender. And there the real test begins. Because what will most people do? They'll flee back. They'll hide again behind masks. They'll pretend they don't feel, don't think, don't see. But you, if you truly want to become someone unbreakable, will have to remain. You'll have to endure the silence revealing who you truly are. Nietzsche said, "The individual must always struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try, you will often feel lonely and sometimes scared. But no price is too high to pay for possessing yourself." That's the essence, self-possession. The rarest and most powerful achievement anyone can attain. Because when you truly possess yourself, nobody else can control you. Nobody else dictates your worth, and nobody else can break you down. But this possession comes with loneliness's weight. You'll lose people. You'll be misunderstood. You'll hear you're arrogant, strange, distant. They'll attempt pulling you back into the mold. They'll call you mad, cold, insensitive. But that's the price of remaining undomesticated. It's the price of not requiring applause. It's the price of not living as a mirror of others' needs. And here's the raw truth. If you cannot withstand loneliness, you're not prepared for freedom. Because all genuine freedom comes with abandonment. Abandonment of emotional crutches, of comfortable illusions, of convenient friendships. That's why Nietzsche viewed solitude as privilege, a battlefield where the authentic self finally has space to emerge. But this liberated mind, this elevated spirit doesn't merely walk alone. It begins perceiving what others cannot perceive. And with that comes the second inevitable effect, the confrontation with mediocrity. Because when you start becoming strong, collective mediocrity senses it, and it reacts. Part 5. The Danger of Collective Mediocrity. Nietzsche didn't fear tyrants, authoritarian leaders, or declared oppressors. What he feared and denounced with philosophical intensity was the subtle and corrosive power of collective mediocrity. that invisible system keeping everyone leveled down, that punishes those daring to think differently, that rewards obedience and disguises cowardice as virtue. True tyranny, according to Nietzsche, doesn't descend from above. It comes from the sides. It comes from the crowd demanding you remain small so they don't have to grow. And that's exactly what occurs when you start standing out. When your mind becomes sharper, your spirit firmer, your presence more uncomfortable, you begin disturbing. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something rare. You're breaking the mold, and society despises those who break molds. Collective mediocrity cannot tolerate individual brilliance because that brilliance exposes ordinary life's darkness. Nietzsche called this slave morality, a morality built by those who, unable to achieve greatness, decided inverting values. They transformed strength into arrogance, ambition into selfishness, independence into coldness. And with that, they created a moral system protecting the weak and condemning the strong. But make no mistake, it's not from compassion, it's from resentment. Because the weak don't want salvation, they want the strong destroyed. That's why when you start liberating yourself, they begin attacking you, sometimes directly, sometimes subtly, with looks, silence, irony. But the message is clear: return to the group. You're making us feel small, and you are, unintentionally, just by being who you are. Nietzsche understood that most people exist in paralyzing conformity, an existence shaped by fear, guilt, and obedience. And anyone questioning this state is seen as threat. But don't be deceived. Mediocrity doesn't attack with force. It attacks with numbers, with consensus, with repetition's weight. It will attempt making you doubt yourself. It will make you think you're wrong for not fitting in. It will use all social resources, from shame to exclusion, to make you lower your head. And it's at this moment many surrender, because they cannot bear being the strange one, the difficult one, the arrogant one. But Nietzsche would give you another name: necessary. Because while the world revolves around recycled ideas, manufactured desires, and comfortable truths, it's the strong individual who brings the necessary discomfort for something new to be born. Your difference is the spark of transformation, but it's also the target of resistance. Being strong, thinking freely, living autonomously, all of this is an act of war against collective mediocrity. And like any war, it requires preparation. It requires weapons. Not physical weapons, but mental weapons. Conclusion: the price and the power you made it this far, that already separates you from the majority. Most people would have closed this video at the first provocation. They would have fled at the first discomfort. They would have turned it off the moment they realized this isn't content meant to stroke the ego. It's a call to action. A call for those ready to release comfortable illusion and face reality with eyes wide open. Because building a mind so strong it becomes feared isn't just a choice, it's a renunciation. You will lose. You'll lose friendships based on superficiality. You'll lose opportunities requiring submission. You'll lose the ability to be content with little. But in exchange, you gain something priceless: integrity, clarity, presence. You'll begin noticing that most people live in slumber, and that your lucidity is frightening, that your firmness makes others tremble, that your absence is louder than many's presence. This strength doesn't come from outside. It's not taught in self-help books, nor earned with ready-made phrases or empty affirmations. It's excavated deep within the soul, in the silence of difficult nights, in the choices nobody witnesses. It's the result of an internal war between who you were and who you're becoming, and this war has no end. Because the truly strong aren't those who have won. They're those who continue fighting even when they could already stop. Nietzsche didn't want to create followers. He wanted to provoke internal earthquakes. He wanted you to stop crawling for approval, to stop begging for meaning, to stop seeking in ready-made systems what can only be built with blood, sweat, and awareness. He wanted you to become dangerous, not in a violent sense, but in a rare sense. So rare that your mere existence forces others to look in the mirror and confront what they're avoiding. And now I want to invite you to do something that will solidify this process. Write in the comments a truth you're tired of hiding, an opinion you're afraid to voice, a thought that makes you feel isolated, but that represents who you truly are. This is part of the journey, claiming your voice, showing your presence, and declaring that you will no longer bend. And if this video touched you, if something inside you awakened, don't stop here. The next video is just as important as this one, perhaps even more so. It continues this journey. And if you've made it this far, you know you're not watching just out of curiosity. You're here because something inside you has already begun to change. So, keep going. You are not alone. You are just ahead, and that, my friend, is frightening, but it's also liberating.